Much better.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
iPod falls from the apple tree.
Screen cheats cheated.
An ocean of respect.
And Duke takes a leak.
All this and more on This Week in Retro.
Neil, you're back.
I am. I'm back.
Fantastic.
And I very much enjoyed last week's show with Dave.
Yes, that was good fun, actually. It was good fun recording. I hope people enjoyed listening to it. It was a good show, I think.
And the highlight for me was you listing off all of the games you have played.
Yes. I mean, granted, they're first-person shooters. And, of course, there wasn't a single point-and-click adventure in that list. But, yeah, just a few. And
good.
Yeah, we all have our niches, so I'm glad I've found one of mine. Yeah.
We do.
How's the cave openings going?
Cave openings are going great. It was a bit difficult last week because it was a double opening Saturday and Sunday. So, a 7-day week and then into the next week, it's tough going. So I've got to, make a few adjustments now and then. And actually, off the back of having Dave as a guest on the show and then having Dave as a co-presenter and enjoying it so much and him enjoying it so much, I think we've all come to an agreement, haven't we, that he's going to be a bit more involved.
Yes, I think, is he now what we call a permanent member of the team?
I think so. And as you just you touched on a moment ago, all those games that you completed were first-person shooters. Dave seems to have a rich history in RPGs and things like that. You've got your flight sims. Yeah. I've got the games that I like to play. And actually, I think if we bring Dave in and the show evolves to have a third presenter or two, when one of us can't make it, it should just make the conversation a bit more rounded and a few more insights. And that charming Scottish lilt that he has can't do us any harm. So
he does.
I'm looking forward
to it. Who's going to write the subtitles, though, Neil?
Yeah, good point. So we're going to kick that off as of, I think, next week. He's going to come and join us, isn't he? And we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Good.
He visited the cave, didn't he, when you opened? Did Dave behave in the cave?
Dave behaved in the cave, yes. He's visited a couple of times, once before we opened proper and once for a proper day. So he's seen it in action and it was very nice to have him. And he brought a wonderful donation of big box games down, including the largest box of Age of Empires you've ever seen. I think it must be one of these like promotional boxes rather than a retail box because it is huge. I'll have to get it to show you in a future show. So very generous of him. And he drove all the way down to the south of England from Scotland. So long old drive and a big effort from Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Cool.
So what have you been up to, Chris?
What have I been up to recently? Oh, well, actually, we had the Perth Amiga users group a couple of weekends ago now. And that was good fun. Always is good, as I've always said, lots of different machines represented. But I've never won anything in any of the competitions. Mm-hmm. And they have a raffle, so it's just $20, so £10 to enter the raffle. And there was some really nice, completely recreated Spectrums, ZX Spectrums, 48Ks. Even though I've already got a 48K, I would have loved one of these because obviously it's like having a brand new machine almost.
Yeah.
And they also had a couple of Commodore 64s, and we all know how little interest I have in the Commodore 64, purely not because I don't, see it for what it is, but I have no nostalgia attached to it. You can guess what I won, Neil. You can guess what I walked away from. So,
is it your first Commodore 64? Yes, and it's a bread bin.
Commodore 64. It's a bread bin, and is it an 85 board or an 84 board? Apparently, the most common board and the one where all the chips are socketed, which is apparently a good thing. Something to do with them failing. I don't know. But yeah, so it's a really good, and it was a really good package I won. So it was that. It has a data cassette recorder. It had 4 games, which are here next to me. So 1985, Skyjet, Speed King, and a brand new game called Freaky Fish, which is a modern C64 game. So I have already fired it up, had a play. Already very impressed, to be honest. A lot of those games don't really show off the SID chip apart from the new one. But what I was impressed with was just the simplicity of setting up and of loading. The experience of loading a game from tape on the C64 already seems worlds apart from loading it on a Spectrum. And our memories around that, and having to balance the volume control to get just the right gain for it to load. C64, there's none of that. You plug it in, you press play, and off you go. And generally
Yeah,
it loads. Yeah, really
there's
good.
also a lot of solutions available for an SD card alternative
Yes.
for the C64, so it's well worth looking into those. A place over here is called The Future Was 8-Bit. They do a very good solution, so I've got that on mine, so well worth a look.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so, well, congratulations on being a C64 owner. Feel good?
I think congratulations is the word. Yes. Yeah, it does. It does. It's good. It's a machine I do need to spend some time with. And as you said, SD card reader solution is the way to go. I've already got somebody that's got one lined up for me. And because I don't have nostalgia, I'm not going to go pouring money into a games collection for the C64. So I'm happy to just experience those off of an SD card. That's the right way to explore that machine, I think.
And I did set you some homework before I went, and I did listen to last week's show, so I know that you did this. So we don't need to go into it in too much detail, but you enjoyed the delights of the game Neighbours on the Amiga. Have you been back to it?
Is not the right word. Yes, I have, because I'd only played it for about 10 minutes when I spoke to Dave last week. So I have fired it up again, and I've played it for probably at least 20 minutes, but that's as much as I could stomach. Is there any difference past the skateboard race around the block, as I would call it? Or is that as far as you've got, Neil?
I don't know, Chris. I've never played it.
That's not funny. Right, we better get into the show, do you think?
Let's do it. Okay, Chris, it was big news this week. Apple is discontinuing its iPod after 21 years of service. And boy, let's just reflect on that. 21 years, that makes me feel old, because I remember the fanfare when this came out. I remember rushing out to get it. This was in 2001 that it first came out. And although it wasn't the first, there were others before it. There was the Zune is a one that everyone knows. Technically, I think the very first, from a little bit of research, was something called the MP Man F10, which came out in 1997. So there were plenty long before the iPod came along. It is the one to which the brand name attached. You know, a bit like Hoover for your vacuum cleaning. Any MP3 player was kind of referred to as an iPod from that point onwards. And the first model, you could get about 1,000 tracks onto it. And it excited me so much because it was the coming together of these technologies. So on the one hand, you had ADSL coming out around about then in the homes in the UK. But even before that, I was at uni in the 90s, where my student accommodation sat on a great big fat 100 megabit pipe to the internet. Is that a Scotch egg you're biting into there? What have you got there?
The pork pie with lots of English mustard on it.
So I had this super fast internet connection, obscenely fast internet connection. Napster came along, so I was downloading a ton of MP3s, and this is Napster in its original form, when it was all about the music. Listening to it on Winamp, of course, with all my visualizations. So really into discovering and enjoying music. And just as an aside, I must say, anything that I downloaded that I really enjoyed on Napster, I did go out and buy on CD back then.
Of course you did.
No, I'm not even joking here. I absolutely did, and I've got a huge CD collection sat in my garage now, which really it's wasted because everything's moved to online platforms now, which we'll talk about in a minute. But so it's this coming together of access to music like I'd never had before, ripping music, downloading music, and building up this library, a large part of which I used to back up onto a 100 meg zip disk. And then the iPod came along, and it was like, yes, this is how it should be done. This is, large capacity. It looks cool. I loved the interface on it, the click wheel and everything, the way they'd done it. And it was dedicated to just playing music. And it had a headphone socket. Imagine that, an Apple product with a headphone, so 3.5mm headphone jack. Brilliant.
Oh, how times have changed.
But of course, a big part of it was not just the hardware, as desirable as the hardware was. It was the coupling of online services in the longer term to download the music through iTunes, sync it easily, and just bring together the whole package. It was all about ease of use as much as anything else. Now, I have a kind of love-hate relationship with it because of that online service and the dependence on that, I guess. So, like I said, I owned the very first, which I loved. I owned two, was it the Nanos, just the tiny little white sticks? two of those
Oh,
which
yeah,
had no
yeah.
screen on. I destroyed two of those because they were pretty cheap actually, and I used to use them for running. And they this is disgusting, but I'd put them in my pocket and the sweat would destroy them after a small amount of
Oh,
time. Yeah. So what I used to do was get some rubber gloves, put them in the finger, cut the finger off, and put that in my pocket. That was my
this is not sounding any
solution.
better.
So yeah, I had that, and then the touch models came along, and all these other models came along that turned the iPad into a multifunctional device. It was no longer just about playing music, and that's kind of where I fell out of love with it, because for me, its single purpose was more valuable to me than having something that was effectively an iPhone with no phone. It lost its focus for me. It lost its magic, and also that constant feeling that you were being ushered into the walled garden of Apple iTunes. I know you could import your own songs into iTunes and everything, but they just tried to make it easier and easier and to use their services. And of course, everyone adopted it. The mass adoption of iPods helped with music as a service, I guess, to become the model and to become the norm. And that's where we are now. So I've seen people on Twitter go as far as to say the iPod single-handedly destroyed the music industry. Now, I think that might be pushing it a little bit far, because let's not rose tint the music industry before the iPod. There were plenty of people, taking advantage of musicians, taking a huge chunk of money with their, I guess, their stable of musicians. There were the Simon Cowells of the world who were and still are trying to do that kind of thing. So the music industry was in no way this lovely rosy garden where everyone was happy before the iPod. But I understand what people are saying. Chris, let's talk a little bit about your history with iPods. Have you ever had one or an alternative MP3 player?
Oh, my history with Apple, as in almost completely non-existent. So no, I didn't have an iPod, and the reason being, and you've kind of covered it in what you've already said, there were cheaper alternatives, but they were kind of nerdy alternatives. So I'll get on to that. But yeah, I'm always one to look out for, well, how else can I do this for cheaper? And one to go complaining about the fact that, well, this isn't the first device, and why is everybody getting so excited about it? And what's with the hype when I've been doing this for a couple of years already? So yeah, I was more into, well, in fact, by the time it came out, there were cheap MP3 players. I was certainly into turning my CD collection into a file collection, if we can call it that, by way of, ripping to MP3 from existing CDs. But I still have, a bit like you, I still have my CD collection. So in fact, I pulled out a few from the boxes behind me just here, because I keep thinking I've got rid of everything from my past, but actually I've still got things like music, because it's never sort of gone out of use. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not like I've dumped it and then rediscovered it because of nostalgia. Music is something I've never got rid of. So, but you can see a sci-fi album, so very sort of into soundtracks. I love my movies, and so my music tastes are similar to that. Huey Lewis and the News, not because I liked them, but because Back to the Future.
Yes.
Now, here's one. So there's not a movie link, but a TV link. I won't go through all this, Paul, but do you remember this, Neil?
Is that Zig and Zag?
It's Zig and Zag. I bought the single.
No.
If only we could play that
Mr.
without
Blobby
getting
next.
a copyright strike. No, Mr. Blobby. So these are mostly things like I've got Mission Impossible soundtrack, that kind of thing. Mostly movie soundtracks, The Matrix, James Bond themes. But yeah, just never got rid of my music, and still actively use CDs, partially because the cars I tend to buy have CD players in them. And even one of them that I've got in the garage, there's no easy way of, apart from one of those FM transmitters, there's no easy way of using anything but CDs. And ironically, the CD stacker that's in it has just packed it up. But anyway, so I still actively use CDs, but MP3s, before we left the UK, I was already fitting head units that supported MP3 on CD. So I was already putting, 10 albums worth of CDs on a single data CD and playing music that way. I remember, in fact, the first DVD player I bought when DVDs were a new thing, and I got bored of playing them on the PlayStation 2, which was my first actual DVD player. I chose this particular model of DVD player because it actually had an LCD display, so you could use it as a CD player without having to turn the TV on, and it had MP3 support. So you could go through, you could set your folders out, and you could actually select through your folders, choose your track, and play music that way. So that was a really good solution as well. So in terms of MP3, instead of the iPod, it was this kind of thing. So I can't even tell you what brand it is, because it's a. Oh yes, I can. It's a. Will we get censored for this, Neil?
Go on.
It's a Dick Smith. This is a Dick
Oh.
Smith MP3 player. So Dick Smith is an Australian brand.
Yeah, Dick Smith's
go on.
just rebranded that, haven't they? They haven't made that. They've just rebranded
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, we could scratch that off and put Amstrad on. It would be the same thing, or Commodore. But this kind of thing, I think I remember buying 3 of these at once. I pulled this out of the drawer, particularly for this episode. I have no idea if it still works. I left it on charge. There we go. It's firing up now. So it still works. Don't know how long that's been sitting in a drawer. But it was because I think maybe my wife was asking about iPods because she'd heard other people talking about them. And once again, I said, nah, there's a better way. And I pulled this out. But even though I have a, I was going to say a love-hate relationship with Apple. It's a hate-hate relationship with Apple. Again, credit where it's due. What the iPod did well and why it became so popular was because it did. Yes, there was other pieces of tech doing this, but not for the masses. It was only for the tech nerds. And this kind of thing, really not comfortable to navigate through. Whereas one of my friends had an iPod. That's probably one of the few places I've touched one. It's the bigger model with the rotary thing on the front, which wasn't actually a dial, but you just ran your finger across it and it would go through the menu. Just doing that was a pleasing experience.
It was,
and
because it was tactile. It would click, wouldn't it?
It was.
Sort of, yeah.
Oof. Just that little click, and was it even a little vibration? I don't know, but it certainly felt like one. Yeah, and it felt great, and it felt robust. And I know you were killing them with your bodily fluids, but generally they were extremely strong, and they took a lot of abuse, and they didn't fail. Whereas something like this, I mean, yes, this one's still working, but I doubt if this would probably not survive one of your jogging trips, for example.
Well, you say that. So, I've got one similar to that, which I do now use for running, although it's been a while since I last went for a run. But, you pick them up for under 20 quid now as a device that only plays MP3s. And people regard that as being, just a cheap throwaway bit of tech now. Where with as much capacity on that in solid state memory as we used to get on the original iPod. So, yeah, we've come a long way. I love that you've still got your CDs, and actually, I hadn't even considered that. I've still got something that's now kind of retro from back in the day that I never threw out. I just assumed I'd thrown away all of my old retro tech, but there it is, a whole library of CDs that can take me back to my, pre-teen years. Even the first CDs I bought, they're all there. So that's awesome. But yeah, the iPod did move us on to services like iTunes, then Spotify, and more recently YouTube Music, and all of these things. And I actually really miss using CDs in my car, as stupid as it sounds, because I like that whole process of, right, I'm going on a trip. It's going to take me about 2 hours to drive. So I'm going to need, 5 or 6 CDs. Let's go and carefully select the kind of CDs I want to listen to for this drive. It's got to be a nice mix. Can't all be the same kind of music. Making that decision, taking the time to do that, and then putting a CD in and enjoying it uninterrupted, unless you've got the traffic announcements turned on. You've got to turn those off. I really like that. But in the car that I've got now, it does Apple CarPlay and also the Android equivalent. So you have to plug your phone into it to access services. There's no CD player. You're not going to be putting CDs into this thing. And I find that listening to music now, my consumption of music on my commute, which is 35 minutes each way every day, so there's plenty of time to listen to something, it's very transient. Music just kind of wafts by on these services. I don't even register who the artist is or what the song is most of the time. It's not a quality listening experience. And I kind of miss the excitement of discovering music and adding it to my collection and then putting it on the devices I want to use or taking the CD. I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's the way we're consuming music now. It's not a quality experience, and I'm not appreciating music as much as I used to. I used to go to record shops. I used to I used to sort of say, I've got a £10 budget on my lunch break today, and I'm going to pick a CD. And sometimes I'd buy a CD I'd never even heard of, just based on the cover. And sometimes I get a nice surprise. Sometimes it'd be absolutely awful, and I'd take it back and exchange it for something else. But I miss those days. I miss it. Maybe I'm just too busy. I don't know. Maybe it's just a sort of a bit of a mixture of everything. Yeah. But you've spoken to us a little bit about how you consume your music now. So is it mostly in the car for you that you consume music, or how do you listen these days?
No, some and some. So in the car, in a particular car that I've got, then it has to be CDs, and I had to burn some CDs to, sort of like you do, make your own mixtape when I first got this car. But the other two cars, the CD player in my Honda Civic, for example, is broken, ironically. So it's either the radio or it has at least got an aux port. So I've taken to plug it in my phone. And in my wife's X Trail, that's got Bluetooth. I fitted a new head unit to that. It still has a CD slot. I made sure I got one that still had a CD slot for when we want to use that, especially for country trips and we want to just take some audiobooks or whatever. Because over here, if you take a country trip, you're going into the middle of nowhere. If you're streaming something from your phone, well, guess what? You're probably going to lose that connection anyway.
Oh, good point.
So it's a good idea to have either stuff backed up onto your phone as local files or something like a CD to listen to. But I have got into Spotify, and I have got into just listening to music via YouTube as well. So, I mean, on my TV behind me here, in fact, if I'm just doing something at this desk, then I might be playing some 80s music videos in a playlist that I've set up on YouTube, and that's how I would consume music. At work, maybe if I've got my headphones on, I might be listening to some, retro wave or synth music or something like that, just sort of background ambient stuff. To do that, but
maybe it's just a time thing. You've found the time to curate a playlist to enjoy through those services.
And it does come back to that, and same when I'm using Spotify on my phone via Bluetooth, or even if I'm outside by the barbecue with a Bluetooth speaker, they are playlists I've created, and some of them I've created based on, say, pick a year and a month that needs something, and I've actually looked up what was the top 40 in the UK, because obviously that's where I was at the time, and put a list together of the top 40 from a certain time period. And then that's what I enjoy listening to from my Spotify playlist. Nice. So just doing things like that. Yeah.
We will get back onto the topic of iPods shortly, but before we do, I got to ask this question. What was the last physical album that you bought? Physical CD?
The fact that I know the answer to this question doesn't bode well, but there is a reason behind it. Mariah Carey Christmas Hits, or whatever it's called.
Oh, okay.
But the reason I bought it, so it wasn't that long ago, but it was for an Evil Santa gift for work. That's why.
Okay.
But it was the first time I'd done Evil Santa, which is where you steal presents of each other. I just assumed we were meant to get a rubbish present, so that's what I picked. What about yourself?
Yeah, so you're sitting on a Zig and Zag CD, but you thought it would be more evil to give them Mariah Carey and not not Zig and Zag.
I'm not giving up Zig and Zag. I should look up what that's worth on eBay, I reckon.
Well, I have tried to address these problems I've been talking about recently, and instead of doing the sensible thing like you and curating a playlist on an online service, I've actually reverted to vinyl records, not in a vinyl is better kind of snobbery kind of way, just can I use this as a way to put myself in a mindset where I have to think about what I'm going to listen to a little bit more and when I'm going to listen to it. So I found a little record shop called Holmes Music in Swindon, which conveniently has a retro video game shop inside it as well. So it's a great day out to go to both of those in one hit.
Cool.
And I buy a vinyl record from time to time. So the last one I bought was called Bright Magic by Public Service Broadcasting. And it's usually on a Sunday morning, unless I'm working at the cave, when I get to, make a coffee, sit down, put a vinyl record on, let the morning sun come through the window and just enjoy that moment. So that's what I try to do. I'm not trying to be a vinyl snob in any way whatsoever. That's just a little bit of me time that I've managed to find. And I am enjoying listening to music in that way. So, that's what I'm going to try and do a bit more of going forward. But of course, when you buy a vinyl now, they all come with a code for a download version too. Don't even need to take the record out to listen to it. Anyway, I'm not a boomer, I promise you. The iPod, I think we can all agree, the hardware itself has served us well. Whether you're on board with the iTunes service and all of the headaches that came with that or not, it certainly introduced music listening to music and consuming music in that way to the masses, as you mentioned earlier. So it's taken the music industry to a new place, whether you think that's a good place or not. Love to hear your comments on the subreddit. Come and visit us at reddit.com/r/this week in retro and let us know your thoughts.
Okay, this next story, Neil, the story I'm about to share with you, in fact, is one I've thought long and hard about whether or not I should share it publicly. You know how some YouTubers, they open up about something personal, and while you appreciate the sentiment and the sharing, it kind of gets a bit awkward. You know that feeling?
Yeah, like when I get Big Chair out and have a Big Chair chat. Yeah, I know those ones.
Yeah. So this isn't intended to turn into one of those, but we'll see how we go. Okay, you just let me know if I'm getting too personal here, Neil. But anyway. So it was around, I'm guessing, 1997, maybe around 98. My wife and I lived in a 2-up, 2-down mid-terrace house in Tunbridge Wells near the industrial estate. So, I'm talking UK, obviously. And we were into the N64 at the time, big time. We absolutely loved it, especially Mario Kart, Beetle Adventure Racing, Diddy Kong Racing. But more than anything, it was Goldeneye, and especially multiplayer Goldeneye. And at the same time, I had a mate called Nick. In fact, it was a weird time when most of my mates seemed to be called Nick. So we'll call this one Nick C. And he was living in a flat down at the bottom of town, but his lease was up for renewal. So it just sort of worked out. We said, well, why don't you come and live with us for a while? We've still got the spare room. That was where my PC was at the time, but I didn't mind moving that. So he became our housemate. And that was great because I got on with Nick. I got on with Nicky, actually. See, even my wife was in this thing of all my friends being called a Nick or a Nicky. But anyway, the good thing about Nick is, well, all my Nicks were great, but he was a huge gamer as well. So the three of us had great times up late at night playing N64 over and over again. But more than anything, any of the other games, it was mostly GoldenEye that we were playing. But this is where it gets a bit personal, Neil. My wife and my mate, they cheated on me, Neil.
No.
That's right. That's right. You heard me right. My wife and my mate Nick, and it hurts to even admit this after all these years, Neil. But they screen cheated, Neil. That's what they did.
Unforgivable.
Yes. What did you think I was talking about? So yeah, whilst playing split screen GoldenEye, they screen cheated. Before we get on to this, are you a screen cheat, Neil, or are your eyes quite rightly fixed on your own screen?
You know how Apache helicopter pilots are supposedly able to operate their eyeballs independently, like some kind of owl.
I've heard legends.
The legend is they can have one eye on the target and another eye on some part of the head-up display. Well, that's me playing GoldenEye. I've always got one eye on your screen, just swiveling independently, looking at your screen, Chris. That's how I play it.
Oh, yeah. I'm avoiding the N64 if I come and visit the cave. All right. Yeah. In all honesty, I was as well. And when people say, is screen cheating? I say, well, look, it's just part of the way you play those games. So I'm into it. I do the same. But if it's intended as a network game and you're looking around at somebody's screen, then that's a completely different ballgame. But anyway, the story that we're covering today, Sean Hollister has written an article on The Verge about a setup at the Computing History Museum where apparently they used $10,000 worth of hardware to fix the problem of screen cheats on GoldenEye. And it was all part of an event set up by the museum and a celebration of the game's 25th anniversary. So they set up 4 screens, so each giving a quarter of the N64's view and hence giving each individual player a screen of their own. I'd imagine navigating the menus would have been a bit of a pain. But other than that, once you're in the game, the game would have had a new edge to it that it didn't traditionally have. I couldn't find details of what the $10,000 worth of equipment actually entails. You're better on the hardware side, Neil. So there's a clip there. I'm not sure if you've looked at it yet, but
I have, yeah.
Can you work out this setup and what's involved?
Well, I mean, $10,000 is a really nice headline to put up there. We spent $10,000 on playing GoldenEye. It's a great headline. What you can see is there's 4 PVMs or BVMs there that, so professional quality old CRTs that people are using. There's actually in the video, the chap there mentions they've got £8,000 worth of kit just in the little rack, the portable rack dedicated to creating the split of the screen and breaking it out to the 4 monitors. And I don't know if they're talking about modern day prices or original prices of this kit back in the day, but I've got no reason to question that it would have cost back in the day, £10,000 or $10,000 easily to get all that kit together. So I think it's a good headline, and I think it's an awful lot of kit, whether you're looking at it in the modern day or retro prices, and it's all set up in this little portable rack, which it sounds like they've designed it in such a way that they can take it to events or they can move it around their museum exhibition space. So it's brilliant. I hope they use it for a long time to come, because I think a lot of people will enjoy that. Yeah.
I knew you'd know what you were looking at, so that's good. Look, I'm sure they thought of this, but we were doing this back in the day. Not 4 screens, but 2 screens. So me and my mate Nick C, mainly to stop him from screen cheating. No, just because we wanted to see if it would work. What we did was we just had 2 CRT TVs, obviously, and we just had an RF splitter. So we're just using out the N64 to RF into an RF splitter into 2 TVs, both tuned in. So you get a signal to both TVs, obviously, and then this did make navigating the menus a bit of a pain, I must admit. We covered the top half of one screen with a bin bag, a bin liner, the big thick plastic black ones. You had to like double. We just put it over at first, and then realised that you could still see through it. So we had to sort of double it up as much as we could. Covered it until we couldn't see through it very easily, and then did the same with the bottom of the other TV. Literally, we did this, and we would play GoldenEye that way. And in fact, what we would do is we would actually go into golden gun mode. So basically, it's one-shot kills. And I tell you what, the adrenaline pumping action you got from playing GoldenEye, where every single shot is going to kill you, and the way it changed the strategy, just hiding down the bottom of corridors, waiting for a door to open or something like that. Fantastic. Yeah, really good. But yeah, it's even when you are screen cheating, what I used to do was I would get a feel of where everybody else was in the map, and then just stand against a wall. So even if they looked at my screen, they wouldn't know exactly. It's not camping. I just know when I knew they were coming towards me, just stare against a wall. They don't know exactly where I am. They get a rough idea, and then wait for them to run past, pop up, shoot them. So yeah, that was good. But very fond memories. Absolutely loved playing GoldenEye. And I don't know if you've played the versions that came after. So you had a GoldenEye on the Wii. So it's like a complete remake or a reboot, if you can call it that. So even the single player game is slightly different, but the multiplayer fun, they put some of the original maps in, and it's still 4-player split screen, and it's just as much fun. And you can also play it on either the 360 or the PS3 in the form of GoldenEye Reloaded. So it's essentially the Wii version, but done with HD for consoles with HDMI. So you get a much clearer screen, which is, of course, really good for 4-player split screen action on a large screen. But yeah, even to this day, it doesn't matter what version of GoldenEye we play, the wife still chooses Natalia, just an old habit. So, and if my mate it was around playing, my mate Nick, he would no doubt choose Odd Job. But yeah,
no, that's not a mate. It's no mate of yours if they're picking Odd Job.
No, we allowed it. Yeah, we had fun with Odd Job and messing about with paintball mode and big head mode and all of that in the originals. But it's interesting. I mean, there's obviously multiplayer first-person shooters has exploded. You think back to something like GoldenEye, where you had it on a console in your lounge, 4 controllers in one unit, and you'd have fantastic couch gaming fun. And it's expanded into what we wanted to have back in the day, but couldn't quite achieve it, which is, now network play, but you don't have to pick your machine up and go around to a mate's house. It's done online. I can be playing against somebody else in Australia or somebody else in England or whatever. It's really exploded out. But there were so many other games that did it in 4-player split screen. I'm thinking of things like Halo and Call of Duty and things like that. In fact, there was a mate's party over here. So a few years after we've moved over here, obviously started to get a network of friends up. And we were into playing Halo, so the original Halo on the original Xbox, 4-player split screen mostly. And this particular friend said, I'm having this party. It's at a hall. I think it was like his 21st or something. And he said, we're going to have 4 Xboxes linked up. So I was majorly excited about this event. So 4 Xboxes, 4 players per Xbox. We knew we had all the mates there. There was going to be his family and everything going around and sort of a buffet table of food and everything. But we were just going to sit at this Xbox table. That day, whilst cleaning my pool, I got bitten by a redback spider. So a redback is
Is
like
that a bad one? I don't
in
know.
America it would be a black widow.
Oh, okay,
So
that sounds bad.
yeah, it sounds bad. So it was in my shoe. As I put my foot in my shoe to then go outside to clean the pool, suddenly my foot started feeling a bit weird. And anyway, long story short, let's not talk too much about the redback spider. Did have to go to hospital, but mainly to be checked out. And they explained, look, most people don't die. You'll be fine. If you start feeling sick, then maybe come in. We'll give you some antivenom, but we don't think it's a bad bite. I was bitten by the male, which is not as bad as the female. So it could have been a lot worse with the female. But my main thought, and in fact, I said it to one of the nurses, I said, I've got a party to go to. Am I going to be okay to go to this party? Because throughout this entire ordeal of having to go to hospital, get this spider bite checked out, am I okay? Am I going to die? Am I going to throw up? Whatever. All that was running through my mind was there's 4 Xboxes linked up at that party.
I need
4
to
players
play
per
Halo.
Xbox. And I need to be there playing Halo. So I just love that kind of gaming in first-person shooters. Yeah. What about yourself?
Oh, wow. That's dedication. Yeah, and actually using Halo as an example, when you go to some of the retro expos now, like Play, there's one, I don't know who it is that brings it along, but they have this great big circular table set up with, I think it must be 16 Xboxes on that, original Xboxes, or with the TVs kind of sunk into the display, so you can just walk up to it and get involved in this massive death match, and it's great fun. However, the last time I tried to play it, I realized it's been so long since I played Halo. I just couldn't, it didn't instinctively get the controls, because Halo, especially when you're driving the Warthog, it's a bit of a weird system. You're not steering the Warthog, you're pointing it in the direction you want it to go. And it just takes a while to click back into that. So I was getting destroyed by anyone and everyone there. But it was nice to see that. Something to consider on the setup that we're seeing here in this example where they've split the screen is you're taking a regular screen, you're splitting it into quarters, and then you're stretching it out into each screen. So each screen has actually got a quarter of the resolution of a normal screen. Doesn't mean you're getting any less, because when the screen's split into 4 anyway, you're just getting that corner. So it might look a bit muddy. I'm not sure. It didn't look too bad on the video. I'd like to see it in person. I need to make a trip and go and see it in person. Hopefully they'll have it as a semi-permanent setup for people to go and enjoy. So it'll be low resolution, but I think you'd still have a huge amount of fun with it, and no bin bags required. So that's a bonus. Yeah, it does beg the question though, doesn't it? If only GoldenEye had a link up cable to play with multiple N64s, because it's so popular here. I've got an N64 set up here on the biggest display that I've got, with the most comfortable chairs in front of it, and everyone goes for GoldenEye. And I must admit, people enjoy it, but a lot of people go, oh, that hasn't aged too well. And then they load up Mario Kart 64. But everyone goes for the N64 and the 4-player and the couch co-op. But, imagine if we could link 4 N64s up and do it that way. Oh, that would be heaven. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It hasn't aged too well. I've actually got it here, and I've probably played it twice. Fond memories, but yeah, it's a hard one. And so is the N64 controller, I've got to say. When people bag it, I go, no, you can't bag it. It's fine. You just don't know how to use it. And then I try using it again myself and go, yeah, it wasn't the best design, was it? But anyway, thanks, Clem Fandango, for sharing this story on the subreddit. If you follow it through to the Computer History Museum's own page, you'll see that the event also featured plans to play unreleased GoldenEye remastered for the Xbox 360. So not the one I mentioned, but a remaster of the original for the Xbox 360. And they also had dev talks by some of the original games team, including Martin Hollis, Dr. David Doak. Is that how you pronounce his name? And
David
Brett
Dokes,
Jones.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
David Doak. Yeah. So, happy birthday, Bond.
Our next story was submitted to the subreddit by listener Protech438. So thank you for submitting this. Even if you didn't see the story on our subreddit, you would have seen it elsewhere. It's a sad one. And it's all about a software house here in the UK, which probably had one of the most recognizable and iconic logos, certainly in the 8-bit era, going into the 16-bit era also. And that is that of Ocean Software. I mean, look at the Ocean logo and tell me that isn't cool. It really is to me. And the sad news this week is that the co-founder of Ocean Software has passed away. He goes by the name of David Ward. Ocean was originally set up by David Ward and John Woods. and the company was originally called Spectrum Games, which was created in 1983 and would go on to become Ocean. It was based in the north of England, up in Manchester, and it gave us games or home ports which included Batman the Caped Crusader, Comic Bakery, Daley Thompson's Decathlon, Miami Vice, Navy SEALs, RoboCop, Whizball, The Great Escape, and many, many more. There's a huge list of games that came out of Ocean. So my first question to you, Chris, is what's the first game you think of when you see the Ocean logo?
Well, look, the first game I think of is Batman, but I'm talking Batman the movie because
Of course. Yeah.
even my Amiga box has got the Ocean logo actually on it. Well, the Batman pack sleeve that goes over the top of the box. So yeah, instantly that's what comes to mind. Oddly though, the second one I think of is F-29 Retaliator. I don't know why that's the second one I think of, but
Well,
again, I think it's because the logo just sticks out
very prominent
as
on
part
the
of that box design.
front bottom of the box, because that was a DID design game written by DID but published by Ocean, and you've got that.
That's right.
It's quite an iconic box art with Ocean at the bottom. Nice. Yeah, good choice.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that one comes up second. I've actually got an extensive list of 22 Ocean titles that I have an intimate knowledge of from back in the day. But after last week, I don't think the listeners need to hear me rattle off another list of games. Games that I've played. So maybe we can add them to the show notes just as sort of evidence. But of the 22 that I've listed, though, David was actually producer of all but 5 of them. So,
wow.
Co-founder, yes, but, producer as well. Researching games that Ocean published, and some were published under other names as well, such as Imagine. And not only was the Batman pack that I had mostly Ocean in terms of the pack-in games, but so too, and I only realised this when researching for this, so too was my Spectrum Plus 3 Chartbusters pack that I had before that. So that came with 2 discs, and I've got them here just as a reminder. But that came with, so one is branded Amstrad, but it's a Plus 3 disc. But you've got games like Gift from the Gods, Maelstrom, Nomad, Super Test 1 and 2. I don't think they are. Cosmic Wartoad, I'm pretty sure, is an Ocean title. And then the Chartbusters disc comes with Cobra, Short Circuit, Green Beret, which is also Russian Attack. Don't think Mutants was one, but The Great Escape is on there as well.
I remember the Chartbusters
Kung
pack.
Fu.
Yeah. Can you hold it up? Have
Yeah.
you got it there?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I just had it mainly so I didn't forget
There
what was
it
actually
is.
on the disc.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's Chartbusters. Obviously, these are repurchases, and that's the other one that came. I think that's the one that came with pretty much every Plus 3, and then the Chartbusters, you got that one thrown in as well. So again, without the actual Plus 3 box being branded Oceans, the pack-in games certainly were predominantly from the Ocean stable. So yeah, games I have fond memories of, I reckon. Great Escape, spent a lot of time with that. Yeah, Kung Fu, definitely. Target Renegade on the Spectrum. Wet Clermont on the Spectrum. Ones that I played both on the Spectrum and the Amiga would be things like RoboCop and Chase HQ.
Just tell me,
Amiga
you mentioned RoboCop there. Now, I was
Yeah.
always a bigger fan of RoboCop on my Amstrad CPC than I was on the Amiga. I felt the Amiga version felt like a bit of a sloppy 8-bit to 16-bit port, whereas the 8-bit version felt like it was pushing my machine to the max.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair comment. Although I enjoyed both, and that's why I've got it listed there under both. RoboCop for me was one of those titles on the Amiga where I would just fire it up and listen to the music. I just absolutely love the opening title music on that game. Don't know, yeah, just one of those things I did with some games. Games specifically on the Amiga, Chase HQ 2 as well as Chase HQ. Space Gun, we've discussed that one before, which was one of the few games compatible with the light gun that I had. New Zealand Story obviously came with the Batman pack.
A Taito game, but published by Ocean.
Yep.
Yeah. They got
That's
all the
right,
licenses, didn't they, Ocean? It was all about
They
the
did.
licenses.
Yeah. Same Operation Wolf, same thing. So you got an arcade game and they got the license for the home port. F-29 Retaliator, we've already mentioned. It's a confusing title. The box art and the planes don't fit each other. But anyway, we won't talk about that. But finally on the PC, and I grabbed this one off my shelf, TFX was one of the first flight sims I got on PC. Enjoyed that. Mainly the fact that the cloud, the way they did clouds, and you could break through the clouds and fly above them and stuff. But I've got this here. This was given to me when I first got back into, suddenly wanting to play older computer games. a friend gave me a huge collection of PC games, and one of them, and the one in the best condition, was this. So this is F-22, which is by DID, same people that did F-29 Retaliator. But I'm hoping, I've yet to actually fire this up. I need to install it. It's a hefty box, Neil.
Oh, it's
I
a good
haven't
manual. I've
done a
got that
page
one.
count,
Yeah.
but it's got a massive manual, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you played this then?
I have. I played it
'Cause
back in the day because
yeah.
there was TFX, there was EF2000, and then I think that came out after
Ah.
EF2000. And then there's another
EF2000
version of
Eurofighter,
that
yeah.
again, which has a lot of additional kind of AI-based mission generators and things like that. They evolve it a little bit further again. But yeah, I remember that being a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
With 3DFX
excited
support.
That's right. Yeah, I just haven't got, because I want to give it some good time, so I haven't got around to actually sitting down and having a play with this. But this is probably the latest, like the last Ocean title that I've got in my collection. Because I mean, this is designed for Windows 95, so I'm guessing it's around 1995. So when you think about the list I've just gone through, as far back as 1983, 1984, all the way up into the mid 90s, and that's when Ocean was still publishing titles. So yeah, it's
yeah, and that game that you've just held up there, it doesn't have the big Ocean logo on the front of it, which is why I probably associate Ocean a lot more with the 8 to 16-bit titles and less so with the PC era going into the mid 90s and onwards. And something I also associate with Ocean is the art of an artist called Bob Wakelin, who made phenomenal art, up there with the greatest 80s movie posters that you see on video games. It's just brilliant. And I don't know about you, I used to go to my local video rental store and ask for the free movie posters, and I'd put them up in my bedroom. And the art that he did on these video games was right up there. If you think about the art for games like Grisor or Midnight Resistance or The Great Escape, which you've mentioned, which incidentally is the first game I ever emulated. The Great Escape I used to play on an Acorn Archimedes. There you go, an Archimedes with a Spectrum emulator. But the art really stands out for me, combined with the Ocean logo. Oh, just brilliant. Just holds its own so well and really grabs the attention. And that's probably why a lot of their games sold so well, because of the way they presented that box art. Whether the game was good or not, Ocean's quality was up and down all over the place depending on the game you were buying. But they certainly presented their games well, and they put out a lot of games. And yeah, like I said, they didn't always get it right, especially when licenses, if they're movie licenses, for example, you're always up against the clock to get that out, to tie in with the movies. Notable exceptions of that are RoboCop, which we mentioned before, which was an absolutely classic game. And if you want to see a great video on not just movie licenses, but Ocean licensed games, Kim Justice brought out a video just last week, I think it was, covering every single licensed tie-in that Ocean released. So that's well worth a watch. You've got over 2 hours of content there to really get to know the back catalogue and what Ocean was all about. So go and check that out. We need to put a link to that in the show notes. And of course, another big licensed one was Daley Thompson's Decathlon, a track and field clone, which came out at the same time as the 1984 Olympics, where Daley took the gold medal. Thankfully, for those who made the game, it would have been a disaster if he'd flopped. But took the gold, he was a success, and therefore the game was a success with him. The old joystick destroyer, as everyone knew it. But funnily enough, everyone says Daley Thompson's destroyed their joysticks. But for me, it was a game called Jeff Cape Strongman, which wasn't an Ocean game. That's the game that destroyed joysticks for me.
Yeah.
Not Daley Thompson.
That's what Super Test 1 and 2 on this disc, they're very similar as well. Lots of joystick waggling,
Yeah. And Ocean, of course, they also released games for the Super Nintendo, the N64, the PC. You mentioned TFX there, which was one of the first games I went out and bought when I first got my 486 PC. I mean, TFX was pushed hard. And that, Ocean would have been behind that. They would have had good connections with the high street stores. They really knew how to sell a game. And I remember my local Dixon's just had floor to ceiling TFX. They had more copies of that than any other game going. So yeah, they were good at selling games. And they had all these licenses, including they had a licensed game for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. They would license anything that had a familiar brand, they would go for it. And that's another example, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, of a licensed game that's actually rather good, surprisingly. So it seems a bit mad on the surface, but if we think about it, the context of all these games and all of these licensing risks and experiments that they took, it's kind of interesting because it just reminds us that you and I come from a gaming background in the 80s and 90s where things were at times absolutely bonkers. Games were released every week that were based on franchises that you wouldn't ever imagine, game concepts that just, where did that come from? Genres came and genres went that were just people experimenting because I guess development was a slightly lower risk. But as you were bringing on the cost of licenses into these things, the risk increased because the amount of money involved increased. But still, companies like Ocean took the risks and published the games. And when we get into those conversations sometimes about modern games and about so many sequels of Call of Duty and things like that, this is why we get frustrated sometimes, because we have that rich background of so many weird and wild and wonderful games that were attempted. And it's still out there in the indie game development scene. You can still find them, but boy, do I miss the days when you could walk into a shop and see a Frankie Goes to Hollywood game on the shelf, or just wild games like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going back into the same realms as I was with the conversation about music earlier and just showing my age. I don't know, but I'm going to make no apology for it, Chris.
Yeah, no, I agree. As you were talking there, I'm thinking, yeah, it does kind of still exist, but then you mentioned the indie scene. I'm thinking about some of the bizarre games that my boys play, such as, I mean, they play the mainstream stuff like League of Legends and Slipgate and all of that kind of thing. But then there's things like Stick Fight, which has made its way onto things like the Switch and everything I know. But and Crawl is another one, which is a retro style top-down dungeon crawler, where if you die, you play the ghost and you have to try and kill the one remaining human and things like that. There's so many bizarre titles, and they are constantly coming out all the time, like they were back in the day. But the difference is we can't go into the shop and just spend our time ogling the screenshots on the back of the cassettes and the boxes, and just our imagination filling in the gaps as to how awesome this game was going to be, often only to be let down once we'd shelled out our pocket money.
Well, remember, you're talking about those games that actually had screenshots. For many of them, it was just based on, for example, the incredible Bob Wakelin artwork that was on the front. You're like, well, that must be an awesome game. The reality might have been very different.
And the description, yes, the write-up, which was a bit like reading the back of a book and making a judgment as to what's going to be inside all 300 pages based on 2 or 3 paragraphs. No, it's exactly true. But yeah, I do miss those days, just being able to spend time on the way home from school, look at the back. But there was a lot of different games, and not just from Ocean. We've got a lot of publishers from around back then. Firebird and Mastertronics spring to mind. A really odd but fun title that I picked up. It would have been because it was in the bargain bin at Woolworths. This was for the Spectrum. It was a game called Park Patrol by Firebird. Yeah, and developed by Activision for the Spectrum. Bizarre game. And I can't tell you why, other than the fact that I could afford it. It was like $1.99 or whatever. But you play a park keeper, and there's ants trying to steal all the food in the park. And there's the park bit of the park, and then there's a river, and you can get in a boat. I can remember some bits. The moment I realised you could get in a boat and get away from the ants that way changed the whole game. One of those games when, what the heck have I bought? And then you get that little bit deeper into it, and it becomes more fun. So that was a really weird. But who invents a game about a park keeper being chased by giant ants stealing food? But that's what they did back then. Probably the most surprising.
Sometimes they base these games, I swear, on what they were capable of drawing with pixels. They were like, okay, I can draw an ant,
possibly.
I can draw a boat. Right, let's work around a game around that.
Yeah, but we could have those discoveries back then. Another one that springs to mind, again from the bargain bin, was Turbo Esprit. So not Lotus Turbo Challenge, but Turbo Esprit by Jarrell on the Spectrum, which we've mentioned before as being sort of like GTA before GTA was even around. An entire city to explore. And again, buyer's regret the first time I fired it up. And then once I understood the game and got more into it, it was an amazing game, and it cost me, $1.99 or $2.99 of my hard-earned pocket money. But even just within Ocean's list, I wouldn't say they were a go-to name for simulation, but we've both just talked about, TFX and titles like that. Wek Le Mans, to me, it really showed what the Spectrum was capable of in terms of a competent driving game. I absolutely loved that port, and so fast, so slick, and challenging. It was only 3 laps of one track, But I remember the day I eventually proved to my mates I didn't own the game; they owned it. I kept borrowing it off them, and I said, "I've beaten it," and they were like, "Oh, "You can't beat this." And I had to prove to them on their own machine, yes, you can beat it, and this is how you do it. F-29, on the Atari ST, just from one publisher, just such a massive range of games. I think there's lots I could say on that, but I think for me, going right back to Batman the movie, okay, yes, it's a movie tie-in, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I'd argue that's one that absolutely did work, and it remains one of my favorite Amiga games of all time. Not just because of the nostalgia attached to the fact that it came with the Batman pack, which is the pack I bought, but it's just I loved it as a game. And it had variety within that game. You had 2 platform levels in terms of the first and last level. You had 2 sprite scaling levels in terms of the Batmobile and the Batwing levels, which are the second and fourth. And then right slap bang in the middle, you had the most annoying level ever created with that stupid puzzle where you had to work out the chemical formula to beat the Joker's poison or whatever it was. But within one game, you essentially had 3 games, and they did a similar thing with RoboCop as well. Who else was doing that kind of thing back in the day?
Yeah, I've just got a list of games here from Ocean in front of me, and 3. I'm going to pick 3 that stand out from this massive list. So I've got RoboCop, of course. I'm going to go with New Zealand Story, a Taito game that they published, because I remember when I first got my Amiga, I got Amiga Format Issue 1, and that was the demo on the cover disc, and I played it to death, and I thought, wow, this is like a real arcade. It's amazing. So I'm glad that they brought that to our shores. And is there anything more Ocean than Lost Patrol? Iconic artwork, the Ocean logo on the front, a moody soundtrack, an experimental kind of gameplay. I'm going to put that right up there as well. It wasn't the best game in the world, but boy, did that game have some atmosphere. So there's some choices, but just look up Ocean Software on Wikipedia, and there's a huge list of games that you can look through. And I'm sure all of us have got some memories associated with Ocean Software over the years. And because of that, it is with sadness and with a lot of gratitude for his work that we say goodbye to David Ward, and we wish all of his family and friends all the very best. And we say thank you for the games, David.
Neil, I recall you saying you were a fan of Duke Nukem 3D, but just like any sane person. But I also recall, like myself, you're in a group that's a little bit more niche, and that is those that actually, shall I use the word enjoyed, in inverted commas, the eventual game that we got under the title of Duke Nukem Forever.
Yes. I did. Yeah. I tried to hide it. I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. After all these years, we did actually end up with a game under that title, at least. And I think it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it, start to finish on the PS3, first of all. And I have it again on the Xbox 360, simply because my PS3 is long gone and we now have an Xbox 360 again. So I bought it for that. And then I spotted it on eBay and rebought it again for PC. But anyway, let's not talk about my obsession with Duke Nukem Forever. But it wasn't really the 3D Realms game we'd anticipated back in the day. It was 14 years late. It was finally released by Gearbox Software, and it would have been, I would imagine, quite far removed from the initial intention. So, Neil, were you, like myself, were you one of those people that was eagerly looking at screenshots online emerging of Duke Nukem Forever way back in the day? Following the ever-changing choice of game engine and the online developer blogs and the occasional screenshot leaks?
Yeah. Well, the original Duke came out in 1996, and I don't think it took us too many years to decide that this was clearly in development hell. After 5 years of waiting for it, it's probably safe to come to that conclusion. There are problems here. If you're going to capitalize on this franchise that you've created, you should be doing it by now. It would be unheard of, really. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking Top Gun, but it'd be unheard of not to bring out the sequel to a movie. Here we are, just waiting for the next Top Gun. So I've just disproven myself then. But, that's the exception to the rule. So, 5 years, you think there's a problem here. After 10 years of waiting in 2006, it's pretty obvious where this is going. So when it was released after 14, 15 years after the original, I must admit I was surprised to see that it finally managed to make to get anything released whatsoever. And there is no way, absolutely no way, that the game that came out was going to be anything like the game that started being developed in 96. I was under no illusions there. And I would love to know just how many times this game was scrapped and restarted and scrapped and restarted and rewritten. And was the storyline the same from the start? Did it evolve over the years? So much must have changed. There must be, a good 2-hour documentary in this if you could get the right people involved who are not under NDA, who could tell us all the gory details. I'd love that one day.
That would be really cool, and especially the storyline aspect. What was the original intention by 3D Realms, and how close was the game, or how far was the game that we eventually ended up with? The funny thing is, I mean, when I got it for the PS3, I remember I was in a shop over here called JB Hi-Fi, just out, as I sometimes was. I think it was a Thursday evening, late night shopping. And I just saw it on the shelf, and I hadn't seen. This is so many years later. I wasn't looking out for it at that point in my life. I wasn't reading any media about what games were emerging or anything. I had no clue that it was going to resurface, and there it was actually on. And I actually couldn't believe it. I'm like, "What the heck?" And I remember I picked it up. I'll try and find the photo. I'm sure I've got it on a hard drive. For Duncan, I know there's a picture somewhere of me holding it in my hand, because I had to take a photo of it, and I sent it to a friend of mine who was also a gamer called Mike, and I bought it because I thought it just had that feeling of, if I don't actually buy this and take it home, it's going to disappear again, and then gone will be the chance to ever play Duke Nukem Forever. So that's how I grabbed hold of it. But basically, there are murmurings of the original version of Duke Nukem Forever finally getting leaked to the public in its current form. So we're talking the version that was shown off at E3 in 2001. So this is the version that they made using Unreal 1 engine, rather than, I think it was the Quake 2 engine they were using before. Depending on which day of the week you were talking about. So Control-Alt-Reese has linked us to a story on Duke4.net, which details the source of the rumor as a guy called X0R. I'm going to pronounce this Zor. All right.
Okay.
Go. X is a Z. So Zor has posted on 4chan, and he's promised to leak the source code in June with instructions on how to compile it and run the code. The story includes some screenshots and quite a few videos of the game in use that are all available on YouTube now as well. And as well as basically there's some quotes that I'll quote in the story from Zor himself that detail things like the fact that this is the Unreal 1 version, like the final game would have been. There is no complete game because it was never finished. The theme, as in the theme tune, it says just the Megadeth version. I don't know why we need the word just in there, because that's an awesome rendition of the title. I had that as my on my phone as my wake up alarm for a while.
What is it? A Megadeth cover of the Grab Bag theme tune from the original, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no lyrics. So obviously just Duke Nukem theme tune, as I call it, and off you go with some heavy guitars, some heavy drums, heavy everything. It's absolutely fantastic. And probably the most important detail he's got there is the fact that the strippers can be seen and interactive with when you first enter the club. So there you go. It's all there, all the game elements. Scrolling through the story, though, and especially the screenshots and the footage, and it's bizarre, but this, for me, was another nostalgia hit. This felt like I was back in the 90s and early 2000s reading a developer blog and being teased with screenshots all over again. Even I've already played the final game, even though, as discussed, it's probably not the same. And here I am being teased in exactly the same way, and the emotions have come back in exactly the same way. It's really weird. So, my worry here, though, Neil, is will it be followed by silence and a lack of eventual substance, just like last time?
Oh, that is the worry, because it strikes me as odd that he hasn't released it straight away. He's sitting on it, and he's setting a deadline for when he's going to release it. And you can't help but feel, this being 4chan as well, you can't help but feel maybe he's just going to string us along, and that day might come and go. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of evidence posted by him. I'm sure he wouldn't have gone to the lengths of faking this footage in the way that we're seeing it. It's got to be legit, surely. I don't know.
Yeah.
My fingers are crossed, though, for you, if for no one else, Chris. I need this to be real for you, mate.
Well, am I actually going to try? That's the thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe we are revisiting the exact same past. I've done some digging, and beyond the story that was posted, and this story is also covered on Polygon.com by Owen Good, and he quotes a tweet from former 3D Realms co-founder George Broussard, and basically, George doesn't know who's leaked the code, but he confirms that it looks legit.
No, he's in on it.
But
he's in on the joke.
he might be. He might. Well, he's actually shut down one of the tweet discussions, because obviously people start then getting narky and blaming him for everything, blah blah blah. So he's actually shut the whole thing down. But he has already confirmed it's legit. He did warn, though, to temper expectations, as there's no real gameplay. It's just a smattering of barely populated test levels. That's what he believes is there, and that fits in with what Zor has said himself as well, in terms of there's no complete game. What I like to think about, though, is, I mean, we've played the version that eventually came out. That was okay. I feel it was tempered by what I think made it so different from the original Duke 3D. Is no fault of the developers or the publishers that eventually got hold of it, but just the time that gaming was at when it came out, in terms of games became more story driven. When you think about Duke 3D, it was just a fast-paced shooter with a hint of a storyline, loosely tying things together, but it didn't get in the way at all. Whereas by the time we get into the year that Duke Nukem Forever eventually came out, a lot of games were really being held down by story writers and cutscenes, which are the bane of gaming in my opinion, just interrupting the flow. So I don't think I know a lot of people didn't like it. I think those are part of the reasons why it came out in the way that it did. So what would this have been like if it came out in, say, 2001 or 2002? And most importantly, what was its competition at the time? So let's say this thing was completed. We all love Duke Nukem 3D, fast-paced shooter. What would this have looked like? Well, the first-person shooters that came out around 2001 include, we've already discussed it this week, Halo was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Halo, great storyline, but again, I don't feel it was really hindered by things like cutscenes and story writers and stuff, even though they were clearly integral to the flow of the game. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, one of my all-time favorite first-person shooters.
You've got to say that in the same way that Dave says it. Wolfenstein.
Return to no. So there was that, and again, same thing. There's a good solid storyline. There's the occasional cutscene, but certainly doesn't get in the way. Tribes 2 apparently came out 2001. Not played that. There you go. One game Chris hasn't played this week. Alien vs. Predator 2, so the PC version we're talking about here. I know you're a fan of that, Neil. Mm-hmm. And Red Faction. So that's the competition that would have been around if this thing had been released. So how do you think it would have held up?
Lots of good, stiff competition there. And the one thing that I remember about the Duke Nukem Forever that did come out was that it did feel kind of dated, not just in the tech. It held its own on the PC that I had, but just in the approach, it did feel like a slightly old-fashioned approach because of the way other games presented themselves at the time. I didn't have a problem with that because one kind of line from Duke Nukem, just said out loud as you're playing, can do a hell of a lot more than a 2-minute cutscene in other games. Just a off-the-cuff line from Duke is all you need sometimes. But the big difference was, if we're talking about 2001, 2002, around about there, this is when we were coming into the era of the big multiplayer games. So, for example, Halo. For example, Battlefield 1942. That was 2002. So, less than a year later than Duke would have come out. Duke Nukem Forever would have come out. Combined with what I mentioned earlier, ADSL becoming readily available, broadband readily available in the home in UKs at that period. And I was a huge player of the Rainbow Six games back then. I was in a clan and we would all, meet up online and take on other clans and just have huge, fun multiplayer experiences, particularly with Battlefield, where it was like 32 players all at once. So nice. Duke Nukem Forever, very much a single player experience. I'm sure it would have had a solid multiplayer element, but you can't have 32 people all as Duke Nukem fighting each other. That would be madness. You know, the point of Duke Nukem is you feel like you're Duke Nukem. You're the guy. You're the man. You know, and it's all about that single player experience rather than 32 Spider-Men all pointing at each other on a map. That doesn't work for me. So, however, what did happen in 2001 is that the original Xbox was released in this year. So I think there could have been a perfect storm and a perfect pairing if the Xbox came out and maybe Duke Nukem Forever was, at least for the first couple of years, maybe an Xbox exclusive. I think that might have done well. Remember the Xbox had the Duke joypad as well. It all ties together perfectly. And you could have maybe had a 4-player split screen co-op mode or something like maybe Duke could have had a little team that comes with him. I think that might have been the perfect storm if it was ready in 2001. Just my thoughts.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, that would be good. Duke with the Duke controller. I was a big fan of the Duke controller. Yeah, that was mine. Everybody else got the small ones, the S controllers. I did actually used to play Duke Nukem 3D multiplayer, but only because I created my office where I worked, 3-story office, in Duke build. And so me and a mate would duke it out during lunchtimes, which was good fun.
I've just mentioned a story quickly. My friend Keith over at the Swindon Computer Museum, he did the same. He recreated his office in Duke.
Yes.
But he went a step further, and I think he's put a video on YouTube about this. He presented it at work as part of something whereby you went into the offices and you basically went postal in the office. And of course, the HR department pulled him to one side and said, I think that might be a little bit inappropriate, Keith. Maybe you shouldn't be bringing that kind of thing into work. Fast forward 20 years, he would have been locked up if he did that today.
Oh, so true. And this is exactly so similar to what happened to me. So my boss suddenly came up, saw me playing, and I explained, it's lunchtime and I'm playing against James upstairs and I hope that's okay. And he saw it and I gave him a tour around the office in Duke Nukem 3D. And his response was, he said, we've got the sales guys are having like a training conference. Could you set this up on like a mini network so they can all play it in the breaks? It was fantastic. So yeah, it actually went down really well. We didn't end up doing that, but the idea was put forward. Yeah. It was really cool. Oh, nice. Good to know I'm not the only one that was virtually going postal in my office. But yeah, oddly, the original Duke Nukem 3D was technically an underdog when it came out. So it was released the same year as Quake. And, they're chalk and cheese. But it had the gameplay and it had a compelling story, but one that didn't get in the way of the game. And it just had bags of character and humor. And I can't think of many first-person shooters that had what Duke Nukem 3D had. But, talking about this leak of Duke Nukem Forever, it's odd to get nostalgic about frustration and bitter disappointment, but here we are reliving the exact same nightmare. I'm happy we did eventually get a game under the title, and it seems that both of us enjoyed it, and I'm sure at least 15 other people did. But if you do want to see the game that would have eventually come out, and see what it looked like in Unreal Engine 1, then simply wait until June when a person called Zor or XOR, who hangs out on 4chan, will drop some code for you to compile and run on your home computer. What could possibly go wrong?
We come now on to our community question of the week. It's been quite a long show this week, actually, Chris. It just goes to show that if I have a week off, I've got too much to talk about when I come back. So I need to stop doing that. But our community question of the week from... now, we're going back 2 weeks ago, aren't we? Because we had to record a little earlier with Dave last week. So we're a bit out of kilter. But the question of the week that we last asked was, it was all based around using your VHS recorder to record gaming. And what is the earliest recording of a game or system that you ever did? How did you capture it? Was it RF into the VHS? Was it a camera pointed at the screen? How did you do it? Who did you show it to? And did they stop being your friend soon after? Do you have the footage? And are you ready to share it with the world? So let's jump over to Reddit for the answers. And I've got the first one here, which is at the top, comes from G. Skizzers. Says, probably my earliest recording was an Atari 2600 Junior back in 86. At the time, this was done through RF, of course, to a Betamax video. No newfangled VHS for us. Sadly, said Sanyo VCR, which was huge, had a recurring problem of chewing up tapes. So we gave it away to some electronics repair guy to fiddle around with. I seriously doubt that any such beta tapes survived the recording. And since I have no Betamax VCR anymore, I cannot see what the tapes have on them anyway. I don't think I did this to show it to anybody. It was more as of a test to see if it could be done. It goes on to say that he's got some video that he took of Target Renegade on the Amstrad CPC using a camcorder in the early 90s, and probably still has that on video 8 tape or whatever they were called, he says in brackets. We didn't used to erase them. So there you go. That footage may still exist out there of Target Renegade. Yeah.
If it had sound, it was probably Super 8. I think Super 8 was the format I was probably thinking of. Yeah. Whereas standard 8mm didn't have sound. Cool. So the next one's from Lobster McGee. I got my NES in Christmas 1988 when I was 11 and connected to the family TV via RF. The next Christmas, we got a VCR, and I noticed that the red and yellow jacks on the side of the NES matched the red and yellow jacks on the new VCR. That's how it happens for most of us. Wonder if these will work. Yep. So I hooked them up, and I was immediately impressed by how much better the image looked on the TV versus the RF adapter signal. Since I was now running through the VCR, I wondered if I could record it. So I popped in a tape, booted up Mega Man 2, and was delighted to find that I could record my gameplay. I did this for a few weeks, using up all of the blank tapes that the family had. God, yeah. And was told by my mum I could only use one tape from now on, and had to re-record over it once it got full. We all had that experience, didn't we? I used that tape until it was so worn that the image was unwatchable. I wish I had it, but I believe it went to the great garage sale in the sky in the early 2000s when my parents dumped all of our old tapes. No. Yeah.
Paul, a.k.a. Hermsky, has the third and final answer this week. He says, I remember in the mid to late 70s using a Binatone console. I was very young at the time, and I can recall my granddad being really impressed with it. He loved new tech. He had one of those Cine Super 8 cameras with 8mm film reels. Film was very valuable back then, and I remember him carefully working out how to spend the 3-minute reel for the weekend. He ended up taking about 20 seconds of us playing on the console. From what I remember, it came out a bit grainy with a lot of flickering playing back on a big white screen. I don't think the camera could keep up with the TV. The recording was all done in black and white, but that didn't matter as the Binatone was also black and white, and so was the TV, come to think of it. We still have those old reels stored at my mum's, and I'm now motivated to try and convert them to DVD. Hang on, isn't DVD a retro format in its own right now?
just put them straight on your hard drive, mate, or just upload them on to YouTube. Yeah,
no, that's a really nice story.
I've done 8mm to DVD, and how I did it was lock focus and just project onto the wall and record the wall. It's the easiest way. Really? Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. And Chris, do we have a question of the week for this week?
We certainly do. So, yeah, in light of the bad news from the past couple of weeks, do you have oceans of memories for Oceans games is what we'd like to know. What were your favourite? Which systems were they for? Were they the exception to the rule that any game based off a movie is terrible? Because I think Ocean really did break that rule. Was your system Oceans branded by way of the pack-in titles? Let us know in the subreddit.
Yep, and that is over at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Come and submit your answers to the community question of the week, or simply take a look at the stories that people have submitted for the week. Upvote them, downvote them. Let us know what you want us to talk about in the next show. And that next show coming soon, featuring Dave for a slightly different dynamic to the future shows. And I'm really looking forward to doing that next week. So hopefully you'll tune in. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil Thomas from RMC The Cave and Chris Winter from 005 AGIMA. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.